No Buddhas have ever appeared on earth, nor is there anything to be given out as a holy doctrine. Only people of the world, who do not understand what all this means, seek the truth outside of themselves. What a pity that the thing they are so earnestly looking for is being trodden under their own feet. Every day we wake up, many emotions, thoughts and feelings instantly flow into our consciousness. Maybe they are a result of a dream we had. Maybe the thought of getting up and starting your day excites you. If so, you are among the lucky few. For most people, the thought of tending to all of their responsibilities is rather dreadful. But after all, what choice do we have? If we don't carry out our oftentimes painful duties, then in the future even more pain awaits us, as the consequences of our actions, or the lack of it, will catch up to us sooner or later. We go to places like work and school for many different reasons. Maybe it's because we don't want to starve to death. We don't want to live out on the street without a roof over our heads. We don't want to get criticized and looked down upon by others. Essentially, every single element of Maslow's hierarchy of needs could be used to finish that sentence. As humans, we have certain needs, and if those needs are not fulfilled, we suffer. It is as if we had a void inside of our hearts, a void that needs constant nourishment, or else it will eat us alive. Every day we fight to fulfill our needs. We fight to escape the dread and the pain that comes with not having our needs fulfilled. If we don't eat or sleep, our body hurts. If we don't feel like we belong, if we don't feel accepted, respected, something inside of us hurts. Whether you call it soul, heart, or mind. Taking Maslow's hierarchy of needs too literally and living your whole life by it may not be the best idea and the most accurate representation of what we humans truly go through. Nevertheless, it contains one of the most renowned and at least theoretically accurate answers to the question, what are we looking for? Let's dive deeper into that question. Namely, let's ask ourselves, why do we look for things in the first place? The answer to that is because we feel dissatisfied with what we already have. We have a natural gravity and desire towards what we call a better future. But what does better mean? It is a future, a life, where all of our desires are satisfied. A life, a place, where there is no seeking, no conflict, no suffering. This would seem to be the answer to our question. Now, another question arises. Is that state even possible? In life, there is a lot of suffering. Many philosophers would even say that life is suffering. So, how can we possibly hope to achieve a life without suffering? Some may say that we must never give up hope and endlessly strive to make the world a better place. They adopt the "if God is dead, let's make our own paradise" mindset. Confucius would call it the everlasting yes. It is an outlook on life in which no matter what happens, we put our life first. No matter how terrible things may be, we keep hoping and keep believing that it really does get better, that in the end it will all be worth it. Others rebel against the world. They revolt against existence and refuse to accept it and fight for it. Confucius would call it the everlasting no. The choice between these two sides, whether to keep on fighting or give up, is the real question. As Albert Camus said, the only serious philosophical question is whether or not to commit suicide. Objectively speaking, there is no right or wrong answer to that question. The only thing that determines which side we choose is our own personal belief about the nature of existence. That belief is shaped based on our personal experience of life. It is that personal experience that truly dictates who we are, no matter how much we may try to logically explain things to ourselves. The only thing that truly speaks to the deepest depths of our being is personal experience. The proof of that can be seen quite often. All the time we do things that we know for a fact are bad for us, but we do them anyway. It is because the experience of doing those things is simply better. So far, we have established two things. 1. The thing we seem to be looking for is a life without suffering. 2. Personal experience is the thing that truly guides us through our lives. It determines the way that we perceive reality. Here we arrive at Buddhism. Logically speaking, the Buddhist philosophy can be said to advocate for the everlasting yes as the answer, and the two principles we have established are incredibly important elements of the Buddhist doctrine. The Buddha proclaimed the fourfold noble truth. It is a system which explains and deals with suffering in the human life. The first truth is that in life there is suffering. The second one is that the cause of suffering lies in desire and attachment. The third one is that the end of suffering is possible by attaining the state of enlightenment. And the fourth one is that enlightenment is to be achieved by abiding by the noble eightfold path: right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. We will explain what the Buddha means by doing all those things right later on in the essay. For now, let's focus on the second thing we have established, which is the importance of personal experience. Zen Buddhism pays a great deal of attention to it. There is a famous quote by a Zen master named Matsu: "This mind is the Buddha himself. One's everyday thought is the Tao." End quote. Life is essentially a series of subjective experiences. According to Zen, the state of enlightenment is to be found in the everyday, minute by minute, second by second experience of life. When we speak of the awakening of prajna, we are in point of fact experiencing this awakening in our daily, momentary passage of life itself. Zen Buddhism teaches us the great importance of being in the present. The end of suffering is not to be found sometime in the future or far away in the past, because the future and the past exist only in our minds. Right now, whether you're sitting, standing, or lying, this is life in its purest form. In Zen, the Buddha is not a godlike distant figure. He is a man just like all of us. His wisdom and his way towards the end of suffering is not far away. The key to Satori is in the here and now. No matter what you're doing or what your life looks like, we can say that the Chinese practical genius has brought the Buddha down again on earth, so that he can work among us with his back bare and his forehead streaked with sweat and covered with mud. When we feel displeased with our lives, when our needs are not being met, when we suffer, we tend to look for things outside of ourselves. We think, I suffer because of this person, this circumstance, this thing. We usually think that the solutions to all of our problems lay in the outside world. We may travel the globe for answers and possible resolutions for whatever we're going through. But Buddhism wants us to realize that the answers are not to be found on the outside, but on the inside. A Zen master named Huangpo Xiyun writes, "Let the Buddha seek himself outside himself. Let the mind seek itself outside itself, as to the end of time there will be no finding." End quote. We don't need to look for anything outside of ourselves. We already have everything that we need for true happiness and fulfillment. You may ask, if we already have everything, then why are we not happy? Why are we still not fulfilled? If we are the same as the Buddha, if our everyday mind, every single thought that we have is the Buddha, then why are we not like the Buddha? Why are we not enlightened? What is the difference between an enlightened person and a non-enlightened person? That difference lies in perspective. As said before, our life is determined by our personal experience, which is, in other words, our perspective on existence. The achieving of enlightenment, or as Zen masters call it, Satori, is essentially a complete change of the way that we perceive reality. As we discussed in our previous video on Carl Jung and Zen Buddhism, the human psyche consists of two main factions, the ego and the self. We already have everything we need to be happy. The reason we think we don't is because we are too attached to the desires of the ego. The ego controls us. Oftentimes, when we try to do things, or even just think about doing something, we hear a voice in our head. Don't do it, you will fail anyway, so why try? Don't do it, it will be painful. Let's do this other thing, it's much more pleasurable. The point here is not to have our ego tell us only positive things instead, like, do it, you will succeed. There is absolutely no way that you won't. That may help us do the thing, but it gets us attached to a certain outcome. We may tell ourselves that we will succeed, but in life, things don't always go as planned. We may still fail, and if we are too attached to the idea of success, we will suffer if we don't get what we want. The key is to transcend the ego. It is to simply do the thing, and even if thoughts and feelings arise in our mind, we can simply let them go, simply let them pass, notice them without entertaining them any further. Before, we spoke of the Noble Eightfold Path, which Siddhartha Gautama proclaimed to be the way to escape suffering, right understanding, right thought, right speech, and so on. To do all those things right means to do them in a detached way. It is to simply do things without wishing for a certain outcome. It is to take things for what they are. Sometimes people confuse being detached with being apathetic, not having a care in the world about anything. However, detachment is not about detaching yourself from the world. It is about detaching yourself from yourself. It is to hear a thought in your mind and be able to realize that it is only a thought, and it doesn't have to be an accurate representation of reality. To be detached is indeed not an easy task, and the practice of meditation is of great use to everyone trying to practice no attachment. However, perfecting meditation is not the end goal. It is simply a helpful tool. We have established that what we're looking for is a life without suffering. Then, after exploring Buddhist beliefs, we have identified attachment and the ego as the cause of the suffering. Consequently, the end goal of Buddhism is the state of ego death. In an ancient Buddhist text called the Diamond Sutra, an enlightened man named Subhuti says this: "No, Lord, once to be reborn is merely a name. There is no passing away nor coming into existence. Only one who realizes this can be called an adept. Thus a venerable one, who will never more be reborn as a mortal, say to himself, I am entitled to the honor and rewards of a non-returner. No, world-honored one, non-returner is merely a name. There is no returning, and no non-returning." End quote. In Buddhism, the goal is the state of nirvana, in which after death, one is no longer reincarnated into this world. But, as the quote explains, it is not so much about no longer returning to the world, but realizing that we are never away and never needed to return or stay anywhere in the first place. Now we're treading into territory where our everyday human logic does not apply. It is a world beyond opposites, one which cannot be expressed in words, one which has no limits, no beginning, no end. Satori is a state of absolute detachment, a state of no mind. An enlightened person is aware of the true nature of reality. Ego death is the realization that all things are empty. At first it may seem counterintuitive or even nihilistic, but from a certain point of view, even according to our logic, it makes sense for it to be so. It is indeed owing to this emptiness as the ground of existence that this universe is at all possible, with its logic, ethics, philosophy, and religion. Emptiness does not mean relativity, as is sometimes interpreted by Buddhist scholars. It goes beyond that. It is what makes relativity possible. Emptiness is an intuitive truth, whereby we can describe existence as related and diversified." End quote. Emptiness is the only thing that is truly free. It is free of mass, shape, size, and all laws that govern the universe. That is why it is free from suffering as well. We exist in this world where suffering is a part of our lives. It is a world of duality, suffering or pleasure, yes or no. As long as we look at the world from the dualistic perspective, our goal will always be to escape suffering. But Buddhism steps beyond duality. It teaches us that all things come from emptiness. There is an old Buddhist saying that all things strive to return to their source. If nothingness is the source of all being, perhaps emptiness is the source that we're trying to return to. Perhaps the emptiness of mind is what we're truly looking for.